Hi, I'm Brandon Briscoe, and welcome to another episode of The Postscript, Living Faith Bible Institute's weekly podcast and YouTube series, where we interview pastors and professors from across the Living Faith Fellowship on all kinds of subjects, from missions to theology to just ministry life. Now, today I have the privilege of interviewing one of my best friends in the world, Jonathan Kindler. Now, John is a teaching elder here at Midtown Baptist Temple, but he's also a professor in the Bible Institute. He's instructing this semester's biblical counseling class along with Sam Miles. And so while I have him in the studio, we're going to do an interview on biblical counseling, but we're also going to have a conversation about his past life in a rock and roll band, if you will, a band called the Chariot. And so we're going to talk about that here in a second. I want to introduce John.
Hey.
What's up, man?
Just loving being here, man.
Are you ready to talk about the band?
I think so. It's been a few years, so I think I'm ready. It's time for me to speak.
You don't get a chance to talk about this very often anymore.
I really don't. Most people don't even know about it. So this is gonna be fun.
So before we talk about it, I want to introduce the band.
Okay.
But I want to give a warning to the listeners first. That the band that John was in was very well known, very famous, but it's what we would call hardcore music.
One might call it that, yes.
Okay, so just so that we don't chase off our listeners too quickly here, can you let them know what to expect in this clip?
Yeah. Okay. So if I know what you're playing, well, I guess it doesn't matter. It all sounds like this. It is heavy. Meaning that it's loud and excitable.
Yes.
We tend to yell more than most.
It's lots of screaming.
A lot of screaming. What you might not hear if your ear is not tuned to heavy music is that it's actually very joyful, and for us was worshipful.
Yeah,
so.
And there's a cultural element to this.
Absolutely.
So if you don't understand it, in other words, if your artistic sensibilities aren't attuned to this, please hang with us, because it is going to be an edifying conversation, even if the music, kind of you feel like you want to be chased off a little bit right here. So
stick with us.
Yeah, stick with us. So we'll go ahead and play this right here. All right, so if you're still with us after that, congratulations, you made it. You've survived.
It's all downhill from here.
Okay, so the Chariot. Tell us who the Chariot is.
Yeah, so a band is actually out of Atlanta, Georgia, and it kind of you were kind of mentioning like the subculture with it. It came out of a movement in the late 90s, early 2000s, kind of dubbed spirit-filled hardcore. And so think about traditionally heavy music, punk rock music, there's kind of a push against or wanting to be counterculture. And for the Christians in that era, they latched on to that idea of pushing against essentially the world, right? And was very loud about it. And
right.
There was a lot of community in it, and
sure.
It was a fun time.
And without overdoing the cultural element, I mean, a lot of these kids are kids that grew up in their house on like the Gaithers. And so, but they find some place among artists, and the fact that it's a little countercultural and edgy, they're drawn to that. And so they find a space there. It was in the early 2000s, it was a big deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was very much a part of, my life early on. It kind of gave me some identity in my faith, and other, people who were like-minded to kind of like, to quote a band, to kick Satan in the face with my steel-toed boot. You know,
that's a lyric to a song?
That's yeah.
Is that Striper?
No, dude. that's like 70s.
Oh, okay.
It's a band called Officer Negative.
Okay.
Yeah. So
well,
look it up, man.
I will. I'll check that out. But okay, so how did you come to a place where you were joining the Chariot? I mean, like we grew up together.
Yeah.
In a suburb in Lee Summit.
Right.
Believers from youth.
Right.
And at one point in college, how did this work out? Yeah,
so the group of guys that I hung out with in college had a band, and did you ever go to any of the Rock for Life concerts they had? Or I think it was called that. It was like out at Starlight Theater.
I remember them. I didn't attend any of those.
Yeah, it was like the mainstream bands, but then they had a bunch of like Christian mainstream bands, but then they had like side stages where, you know, they let bands play. And the guys I was friends with were going to play this, and their bass player quit. I grew up playing drums and stuff, but they were like, hey, we need you to play tomorrow, you know, the show. So I just got up there and like, they told me what like buttons to push almost, like how to play this. And just for the next year, I just played shows with them. And weird moment, like I was playing pickup soccer, which is weird because I don't do that really.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like you.
Yeah, I was terrible. And a van pulls up to the field. These guys pour out of the van. They're all like, you know, punk rock dudes. And I was looking over there and they looked familiar to me, and just went over and talked to them. And, you know, they were kind of in between tours. And as I was talking to them, one of the guys got a text and said, oh man, our merch guy quit, the guy who sells their CDs and shirts and stuff like that at the shows. And I was like, I'll go. I literally was between my junior and senior year in college, and just left town for 6 weeks with these guys. And, you know, we played like every major city in the States.
So you weren't incredibly familiar with their music until you went on tour with them?
Well, I knew I was.
Okay.
You know, I had listened to them, you know, and I liked some of the stuff. And the singer of the band had been in other bands I'd liked. And so I was familiar with them, but I didn't know them. And then, and it was awesome because we played this crazy like metal fest where there's kids coming up to the merch booth, and I just got to, you know, essentially share the gospel with them, love on them. And it was just so impactful in my life. And then at the end of the tour, they asked me to be in the band. And
did they know that you were trash at the bass?
I told them, you know, I told them, I was like, hey guys, I actually don't know how to play this instrument. And they said, oh man, we'll teach you how to do that. And they said, we really believe God's calling you to be with us. And so I, you know, prayed about it for a couple of weeks. And I remember I was in 2 Kings where Elijah and Elisha, you know, when Elijah was taken up in the chariot of fire, which, you know, I was just reading through that book. And what was really powerful about that verse was it really hit me in terms of where I was in my life. Just had been following Elijah for a long time. And like, it felt like God was saying to me, you know, hey, this is your time to do some ministry, you know? So for the next 6.5 years, I did that. Yeah.
That's crazy that it was that long.
I know. It is crazy.
It didn't seem like it was that long.
It went by really fast. Yeah, and got to see the world and, you know, meet a lot of people. And
so in terms of ministry, I mean, that's what you're explaining, that to you saw it as a ministry opportunity. Explain what that's like. So you're traveling the world.
Right.
These shows sometimes do have thousands of people at them.
Yeah. So depending on where we were, you know, the shows would be bigger or smaller. But you know, it was pretty cool because, like I was saying, we would play with a lot of bands, and the heavy music scene is often really dark, you know. And so our mission was to be a light in that dark place. And you know, every night it was just like clockwork. Kids would come up to the front of the stage. I'd just sit on the front of the stage, and they would ask me like, why was your set so joyful compared to the bands that played before and after you? Which is just a wide open door to say, well, that's, you know, because we have Christ, you know, and to share that with them. And it's interesting how, you know, kids who listen to your music, you listen to a band enough, you think you know them. So they would just come up to me and start sharing like, hey, this is what's going on in my life, you know. You know, I had just came to mind a kid in Chattanooga, Tennessee, came up, and he had a, you know, sweat sweatshirt on, but I could see bandages underneath his sweatshirt, and just ask him about it. And he ended up showing me that he had like mutilated himself, and was in the hospital, and got to share the gospel. This kid, the next time he came, shared the gospel again. He ends up getting saved. I got to follow him, like that was early on. I got to follow him all throughout like his college years. He'd come out to shows and like just doing awesome, following the Lord. So it's just like really cool to see these kids who are just searching and looking for something, and just really seeking, and to have a voice in their life, which is,
and obviously, I mean, just like anybody who's loved a band, I mean, you look up to the people that are making that art. And so it's really easy if that person is also personable.
Absolutely.
Like if you can be someone that people look up to, and then you're also actually really friendly and kind and want to listen to them, that could be pretty powerful in someone's life.
Yeah, and that was easy for me because I was always reminded about how I wasn't a real bass player. So kids would come up and they would be so excited because like, oh man, you're like the best bass player. And I'm like, it was great because I could say, actually, I don't know what I'm doing. This has just been an open door, just get to share. Just get to share from there. So it was easy for me to stay humble in that sense because I didn't really feel like I, belonged in a way. So
what was touring like?
It was ridiculous, so cool. Some days like the highest highs and then the lowest lows of my life. And that was sometimes back to back, so you, depending on the tour and the size of our band, we could be like riding a bus, sleeping well, like getting good money. Or if we were
hold on, by bus, you mean like a legit tour bus?
A tour bus.
Because someone's going to hear that and be like a yellow bus?
No. Like it has bunks, it has a kitchen. You can use the bathroom.
And that was great.
Yeah. Oh man, I was like.
But then other times you guys were in like a rental van.
Oh, we were in a 18 passenger sleeping on the floorboard in a Walmart parking lot. There's nothing more humbling, okay, than waking up at noon because you drove all night and you're disgusting because you played a show last night and you have a fanny pack with all of your like amenities in it. And you walk into Walmart and the greeter's like, hey, like welcome to Walmart. And you're like, I'm just here to brush my teeth. Like that is like the low, right? And you're in there washing your face and like people are, and of course I already kind of looked
a little homeless.
That was already my vibe. So,
but that was a lot of the touring through the US, especially was in bus.
Yeah. Some of it. Yeah.
But you did a lot of overseas. I mean, talk about some of the places you went overseas where you got to meet people from like every continent.
Yeah,
almost,
man.
Right?
We played in wild, like places you'd never think of. We played in Siberia and Latvia and Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, Japan. We went to Australia a couple times, New Zealand. So we went a lot of places. And when I think about that, it was so cool because it's like, you meet all these different people and you see, you walk in, out of the airport in Japan, it's like literally like it feels like a Sonic the Hedgehog video game. It's just so different than what right? Just like lights and, coins everywhere. Not really, but it's not actually like a video game.
Yeah, I know. I was trying to make the Sonic analogy thing work in my mind.
It just felt like that on the highway because like you're driving through and it just interweaves and lights are blinking. And but what happens is you get past the cultural components of it and you see this soul, right?
Right.
You meet this guy who doesn't know your language, but when he finally gets a way to share his heart with you and you can really talk with him, it's like, oh man, you're the same kid I met, in Fayetteville, or whatever. And that was the part that was so like just comforting in a way. It's like everything is so different and everything is so the same. And
at the level of the soul, man, everyone's the same.
Everybody's the same. Like they're lost, they're searching. When we were in Japan, one thing I did was I always was trying to collect Bibles in different different language translations. And the record label that we were on there, the guy took me around for hours. We could not find a Bible in Japanese. And we finally found one in a used bookstore. And I was so excited. And by the end of it, I actually ended up giving it to the guy that took me around. And I still talk to him on Facebook. He's like, I read my Bible like every day, but it was like a treasure to him because he was like, whoa, we don't have Bibles. He
didn't own one.
No.
And he was a believer?
No, he wasn't. No, but I shared the gospel with him, and he professed, Christ. So I think that he's saved. But
wow, man, dude.
So just cool to see the world. You get like the first couple tours, you get past like, whoa, we're in Spain or wherever you might go or whatever. And then it's like you start to see the people that live there and see them. They're just like everyone else.
And so at least for part of your tour life, you were living at our house.
I did.
Yeah, me and my wife's house.
By the way.
No problem.
Thanks for that.
It's all good. And you'd like come into town and we'd check in on you. We'd make sure you were doing okay. And then we'd mom and dad you a little bit, and then you would head out again and be gone for several months, and we wouldn't see you.
Right.
I mean, obviously that was wearing in some ways.
Yeah, definitely.
And obviously there's a lot of recording albums. There's probably a lot of fun photo shoots. Like there's a lot of really fun things about, I guess, living like kind of a rock and roll dream. I mean, that seems like a lame way of putting it, but that's what you're doing, right?
There was fun things about it, yeah.
Yeah, but then there was also probably hard things.
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe explain some of that stuff.
Well, man, as a believer, it was really hard. In fact, messed me up for a little while. I mean, if you think about the stage that gets set there, it's like I was 21 when I joined the band, so I'm like full of zeal, excited about what God's doing in my life, and then you're just like away from the body. Right? Like, we'd be gone we toured like 10 months out of the year, so it's like you're never at the local church, right? And then all the other components, you have a ton of idle time. Everybody cares about what you think. Everybody has an opinion about what you should think, All the Christians want you to be their version of what a Christian is. And over time, it just starts to create this like pressure that turns you into like this shell of a person because you're trying to be what everybody wants maybe, and you're not getting filled just with the word. And, we even would attempt to try to, we had a pastor on tour with us one time, and just different ways that we were trying to like work through that. But it was really rough in that sense. And I remember like in 2009, there's a big Christian festival. It's called Cornerstone. And we played that. And I remember standing on the stage and I was so empty, and I saw, we looked out and there's probably like 15, 20,000 people just like that. And I just felt this overwhelming pressure to like give them something that I did not have, and it was convicting and terrifying, honestly. And that's a kind of a long story, but it ended with me crawling underneath a car and just like laying there weeping, and I actually quit the band for a season. I quit for 6 months. I went back to school and finished my degree, and even was like struggling with my faith. I was actually walking through the Union where I went to school, and they were signing people up for Bible studies, some campus ministry, and I signed up, and I accidentally signed up to lead a Bible study, which is hilarious that they were letting people sign up to do that in the first place.
Yeah, they don't know you for anybody.
Right. But I was like, all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, I'm about to lead a Bible study. So I picked up my Bible, for the first time in a while. And that's really where God got a hold of my heart and in a real way re-envisioned me. When I went back to the band, I had new direction. I had set things in place, like I had accountability back home. We had a pastor who was reaching out to us, and I would go to church every Sunday. I've been to every kind of church you can possibly imagine. I would get out of the bus or van, I just walk until I saw a church that wasn't a cult, and I would go to church, and it still would wear on me though, and eventually it led to me needing to walk away.
One of the things that you mentioned to me in times past is that you met a lot of famous people in the Christian music industry over the years, being in the band.
Right.
And one of the things that always surprised you was that those guys seemed to be suspended age-wise or maturity-wise at the age that they began doing music.
Right.
Like, so maybe they're 45 and they started touring at like 16 or 17, and they just stayed that person because there was no maturation process.
Yeah, there was no way for them to be trained up or to, so they were just that person frozen in time, and so was their faith in a lot of ways. It's like they're still maybe drinking milk, right? Because we need the body to be discipled, to be envisioned. It's the context of where God works out the plan that he has for us. So without that, it really, you're kind of just floundering in a lot of ways.
Right. I remember you also saying that you were surprised how many people were in the Christian music industry that just had actually completely walked away from their faith. It was just a facade. It wasn't even real.
Honestly, that's one of the things that just messed me up big time going through it, because we'd play all these big Christian festivals, and that's really, we would run into more of the mainstream like Christian, like K-Love Christians bands, and they were going through the same thing that we were going through, but on just like the heat was turned up, because there's even more pressure and
there's more money, people,
all of that stuff, and so it doesn't take much, right? As soon as you depart from presenting yourself as you are, just even a little bit, there's no limits to that. It's so incredibly vast. It's like they still think that I'm this guy, right? And so as long as I hold that facade, then you can slip into whatever is available, and because of the lifestyle, everything is available, right? So it's just really sad to see some of that.
And there's people working to keep that false identity going, perpetuating it over and over. You got teams of people who are working to keep that facade up. Meanwhile, you're wandering in the darkness.
Right.
That's tough. So at a certain point you quit the band. I mean, how did you justify that? What did that look like? And
over that last stint in the band, God had given me a lot of direction on just some things that he wanted in my life, in terms of ministry. And there's a couple of things. You gave me a directions book. I don't know if you remember that.
And directions is the material we used to use for biblical discipleship.
Right.
Yeah.
So I started going through that, and it was just like messing me up. I came to Mission Focus, like I think it was like 2010 or 11, maybe, I don't remember, but just starting to get envisioned for ministry. One thing that just I loved about touring was like getting to talk to people at the shows, and I kept wanting to know how to do that better. Some of the people that would come to me had just like unspeakable stuff that was going on in their life, and I really felt drawn to that being something that God wanted to use me to do. And so one night I was on our bus, and I was just laying there praying, and my bunk was right next to the main commons area in the back of the bus, and we were sharing the bus with another band, and they were just like all out brawling, like the band was literally like gonna split up, and I was listening to them as I was praying, God, what do you want me to do with my life, and I heard them, and these guys were believers, but they were just like destroying each other, and it was brutal. So I just slipped into the room, and just started kind of talking with them, and by the end of it, they were hugging, and they had really like heard each other and reconciled some things, and went back to my bunk and continued in my prayer, God, what do you want me to do? And I really, God was like, this is what I want you to do. And I didn't even know what that fully meant, but I knew that it was helping people who oppose themselves, right? Like, and so that was kind of like the beginning of walking down that path. And it looked like me applying to grad school and quitting the band and coming back and going to school, getting discipled, all that stuff.
So you moved back to KC, and you started going to Midtown Baptist Temple, and you started discipleship, and you're in school studying to be a professional counselor.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe explain that time in your life and what that transition back into a new norm was. Like it was a completely new reality, diametrically different than like being on a bus with a bunch of dudes.
Yeah. Very different.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, it was a lot better, like a lot more clean. You know,
the hygiene
went
of this lifestyle
went way up for me. Some of that stuff really messes with you. You know, like being on like the pedestal of so many people. I went from playing a show in the Ukraine, flying to Frankfurt, to Atlanta, to Kansas City, into a car, into my first class, and nobody knew me. Nobody cared to know me. And that was weird. And that's like I hate even saying that, but it was like I was so used to people caring what I think. Yeah. And so it was humbling. And man, God really used that to refine me in a lot of ways. So just shifting from that craziness to now being a part of a local church, and God fitly joining me into ministry. Dan Renault discipled me, completely turned my world upside down in terms of like knowing the Bible for myself. Like I'd read the Bible my whole life, but to actually know the Bible, like for it to read me, right, and direct me and guide me, and to understand what the local church could provide me, and just a lot of these things that I had not really ever fully been able to understand or wrap my mind around. And so it set me on a different course, and changed my life.
So obviously the audience that you minister to is different now. It's smaller. Your influence looks different. But in what ways do you see the fruit of your ministry now more effective than even the evangelical fruit you had when you were touring? Yeah.
So when I look back on that, I think, we were just throwing out seed, everywhere we go, that was our hope, like to be a light in a dark place, and we're throwing out seed. But in terms of like actually getting to like nurture it and water it and like pour into it, like that just wasn't happening, right? Not only was it not happening to us, right? We weren't being poured into, but we didn't have the ability to disciple anybody or
right, because you were on to the next place, and even if you were effective in someone's life, it wasn't like the relationship was sustainable.
Right. So the song that you play at the beginning, okay, so that song is called "The City," right? And the concept of the song is the Great Commission, right? So it says, "This is a revolution," right? It was so fun to play live because kids would know it and they would sing this chorus together, right? And it's like this whole room, right, singing this chorus, and it says, "This is a revolt, and then we're moving to the next town." And it was really powerful in that sense because that's what we were doing. We were moving to the next town. But
Christ was the revolution that you were bringing to the Ukraine or to whatever country or city you were in.
Right.
You were in many ways revolting against the status quo of their society by bringing the gospel. Right. But then you're gone.
But then we were gone, and I don't know about where all that seed is, but here, like in the local church, it's like, oh, I can look at my disciple, and I can see, I meet with them weekly, and I can see God moving in his life, and now I can see him discipling. Yeah. I see this like transformation over generations of discipleship, and you see them like step into the body, and like for them to worship, right, and for them to really understand that God's word is their authority, and then it transforms their heart, and you see them getting plugged into ministry, and like being filled with like joy, peace, right, like long suffering, like you see the fruit, right, and that was really eye-opening to me because I didn't really have I guess I didn't really have a frame for that until now, you know. Before it was just like, man, I hope some of this stuff grows.
Which, growing up in an evangelical church like you did, sharing the gospel like that was
Right.
the Great Commission. Like
Right.
that was the extent of the Great Commission.
Right.
Because you weren't familiar with the concept of discipleship.
True discipleship.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's changed everything about your ministry.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now you're back in Kansas City and you're plugged in to church and you're a teaching elder here at Midtown Baptist Temple, and you've got a thriving counseling practice in the city, and a family, a wife, a baby.
Who would have thought?
It's crazy. Time just goes so fast.
It
It's
does.
nuts. Maybe talk to us a little bit about what life's been back since you've been here.
Yeah.
And how God's worked in your life.
Man, when I hit the ground back in KC, started getting discipled, like a couple of months later, met my wife. She started getting discipled by Dan Renault's wife. You know, I was in grad school, just kind of crazy, just like ministry. Me and her led worship in the college and young adults program and program class.
Yeah.
It's not a program.
I knew you meant.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, we got married right when I graduated and started my practice, and, man, it's just been really cool to get to do that work, you know, instead of the business of getting all sweaty and playing shows, and I just get to skip all that and just get to talk to people. And that's been, awesome. You know, for Marcy and I, my wife and I, we kind of had a rough go just at the beginning of our relationship, with, getting pregnant. You know, we had 4 miscarriages, which was just a crazy, sad season. And, you know, it was awesome in that it led us to foster care. And we've been doing that for the last 2 years. And we have a little girl that's with us now. And, just amazing how God works, you know, like as soon as we, started all of that, we ended up getting pregnant, and now we have a little 6-month-old dude that you held last night.
Yeah.
And so, man, God's faithful, but it is cool to see, just how quickly time passes, and especially in ministry, like there's so much fruit. You know, I'm with Kenny Morgan. We have our life fellowship and just a Bible study at our house. Like just God like fills our life with ways to produce fruit, you know, and that's what it's like being in the body, right? There's just everywhere you turn, there's an opportunity to produce fruit for the kingdom.
Yeah, and in a way that is sustainable,
right?
Where you're not leaving anything behind. You can actually endeavor, you know, for life with people. Right.
Yeah. And it's been so sweet. Nothing cooler, I don't think, than, getting to live life alongside people. Like we're doing this work together.
Well, dude, I'm so thankful that you're home.
Yeah.
And that it's not like it was 10 years ago when you were gone all the time. And for me, it's been, I mean, you're like my brother. So,
for better or worse.
For better or worse, we're like brothers. And man, it's been so good. There were times where I thought, man, I don't know if he is ever going to get discipled. I don't know what life's going to look like, you know, after the band. And it's cool to see how God answered all those prayers that I had once upon a time.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So
thanks for praying for me.
Yeah.
This is too a really good opportunity, right? So for everyone watching, just to know that we're not the same person.
Yeah.
It's been good for me, right? Like, but all good things, you know, come to an end.
Yeah. So what John's referring to is that people get us mixed up.
I don't know why.
Particularly the long hair.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Sharp nose features, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, they get us mixed up. Yeah. If we're in public, we tell people that we're brothers, though. Right. That doesn't help. Probably.
Yeah, lying usually is
it's not good. Yeah. We're not actually brothers. But we might as well be.
Yeah, I don't think I've known anyone as long as I've known you. Like in 3rd grade, I think is when
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Yep.
I love you, dude.
I love you too.
Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
It's a good
cool.
story. I thought people should hear it.
Yeah. Don't judge me.
Don't judge John.
Yeah. That's the moral of all of this.
Yeah. And just because he was in the Chariot,
and go listen.
Doesn't disqualify him from ministry.
You can still stream all of this. Just have fun.
Yeah, go create a playlist, a Chariot playlist.
You know, I did create one for Brian Clark, and he hasn't talked to me since. So
he just listened to that one time, and he was like, I'm done. He wrote you off completely.
Every time I call, it's just straight to voicemail. So
well, I love you unconditionally, and hopefully other people can get past the fact that you were in an insane, loud, obnoxious, shocking.
Give me a chance.
Yeah. Dude, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for telling the story.
All right, bro.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Postscript. Hopefully listening to John's story was edifying to you, and hopefully it reminded you just how important the local church is. And I think a lot of times we daydream and we think about all the ways in which we might serve the Lord. And a lot of times we miss the most important and elementary aspects of a faithful walk with Christ. And so it's really important for us to consider the basic truths about who he is and what he's left us. And he's left us a church. And I think John's story reminds us of how important that is. If this conversation intrigued you, please go back and listen to other Postscript episodes. Go back and listen to other interviews that we've done here on the show. If this conversation intrigues you and you're interested in taking a class with John Kindler, there are lots of professors, maybe not that played in rock bands, but other professors and other pastors who love the Word of God, who believe in discipleship, who have a philosophy that matches ours. And you could learn from them. And so visit lfbi.org if you want to learn more about Living Faith Bible Institute and the classes that we have to offer and the training we have to offer. You actually don't even have to leave your home church to get the training you need to be a minister for Christ. And it's for everyone. It's not just for pastors. It's for anyone who wants to be a leader. So check that out as well. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We would love that. Leave a review. But outside of that, we want to thank you for joining us, and we ask that God would bless you. See you next week.